Hey guys, Nickon here, and welcome to part 1 of my 3-part review of the Bionicle 2015 Winter Wave. Sorry I'm a little late to the party. In this video, we'll be taking a look at the protectors. Okay, so these are the little guys of this wave, kinda halfway between a Matorn and a Turaga. While most of the villagers shown so far look identical to each other, unfortunately, these particular figures represent the chieftains of each tribe, wise enough to guide the tow on their new adventures and strong enough to defend themselves and even act as backup to boot. I like this idea, and as sets they're pretty cool. The protectors of water, jungle, and stone feature more or less the same build, being the most average you could say, while the other three tend to be a bit burlier. While their builds aren't anything remarkable, they each feel distinct enough, with slight variations in body proportions and height and whatnot. For example, the protector of water is petite and has the most fair build. I do think some of the ways they've tried to accentuate her femininity yield mixed results, but I find her endearing nonetheless. The protector of ice, on the other hand, is very stout and bulky, which makes sense, as having a smaller body with a stronger center would make it easier to stay warm in cold climates, and I can't help thinking that's exactly what LEGO was going for. I do wish his arms had an extra joint, but in putting more emphasis on certain parts of his build, others have had to be downsized so everything evens out and they don't have to raise his price $1 above the other figures or something. Yeah, that's one thing you'll find with a lot of these figures. For every area in which they excel, some part of them has to get nerfed to equalize things a bit. The only one that really suffers because of this to me, though, is a protector of fire. I love his torso design, but the rest of him suffers to make this possible. His arms aren't any stubbier than the protector of ice, but they feel like they are because of his bigger body, and his legs are totally wonky. I can see what they were going for, giving him Mega Man-ish legs that get bigger the further you go down, but his thighs are so short that most stances you put him in will just be awkward. All they have to do is make the thighs a little bit longer and voila! Fixed! In the end, the protector of fire, while having a great torso build, ends up being the worst protector figure overall in my opinion. That's not to say he's a downright bad figure though. All of these are great, but one of them was bound to fall short, and for me it's this one. With a couple of extra pieces though, you can make this guy look really cool and much more accurate to how he appears in the online animations. But in keeping his price down with the other protectors, they had to prioritize certain things and sacrifices had to be made, so yeah. Anyway, nice builds overall. There are still some little things that make me scratch my head, such as a protector of stone lacking any sort of back armor, considering he and the protector of jungle are basically the same, even in terms of weaponry, but these can be glossed over and easily fixed. One of my favorite things about the protectors is how their limbs are constructed. Most figures built with this system use sockets and hinges for the knees and elbows, like the old Bionicle figures, but because these guys are pretty small and not heavy enough to really need that kind of reinforcement to keep their limbs from bending sideways, they have simple ball and socket connections more often than not. They don't all use these pieces this way, and how well they're used varies from one to the next, but it's an interesting idea that I think works really well for those that are built this way. It gives them a great range of posability, especially on the legs. Despite some personal limitations from one to the next, the protectors have great posability for their size, and you can easily make them expressive through the body language alone. They're also just the right size to do this. Alright, so let's talk about their color schemes. There's a huge emphasis on trans-colored pieces in all these guys. Most of them even have trans bones. I think the Protector of Ice has the best color scheme, with all the white bits spaced out evenly, if not downright perfectly over the colder blue elements. It feels like a layer of snow on top of ice, and I think he feels the most complete in regards to fitting his element. His mask also matches the rest of him flawlessly, which I can't quite say for all the others. Even the little things, like the yellow knobs on his two different weapons, match, and because of that, I don't think they detract from his core colors much or make him more chaotic like they easily could have. The Protector of Water is a close second. She has more trans elements than any of the other figures, and I'm pleasantly surprised that they could make so many tones flow together this well. It almost looks like she's made of water. I also love the yellow elements, since the clash in colors is an effective visual indicator that these aren't a part of her body, that they're just pieces of equipment strapped onto her arms like floaties. I also like that her feet, being darker than some of the others, make it look as she's wearing flippers. The worst in terms of color scheme is a protector of jungle, though I'd like to remind you that when it comes to these guys, worst doesn't really mean much, just slightly less stellar than the others. Between his bow and other elements like the sensory feelers on his ankles, he's all over the place. Putting those more superfluous elements aside though, I like the yellowy bits. They fit the whole jungle theme well and they make him really bright like a fruit. Some feel the trans green armor pieces are kind of meh and clash with his mask, but I've tried switching them out for Lewa's opaque green pieces and let me tell you, he really doesn't look that much better this way. I honestly ended up preferring the trans green pieces even though I didn't think I would. They're slightly closer to his other colors and just really bright. As crazy as his colors are, they do work for the most part. The Protectors of Earth and Stone are probably the most plain of the bunch, but I still love them. The Protector of Stone's bright yellowish green bits may look strange to some, but I personally like it and think these elements complement the brown ones nicely. And the trans purple bones on the Protector of Earth are just beautiful. Heck, hold any of these guys up to a flashlight and they look cool. In fact, I kind of wish a Protector of Fire, who's already littered with trans-orange elements that make him look like he's covered in flames, could have just one more under his chest armor. That would almost make it look like his body is an oven that contains his fiery spirit, like it wants to burst out and spew everywhere, but he has to control himself or something. Anyway, for the most part, I love how these little guys look, especially together. You could pick out any one of them and find something that seems a little off, but stand any two of them next to each other, and in most cases they look great together. And once you get all of them, you get this explosion of crazy colors that create this great elemental feel and really give them life. They're surprisingly cohesive and so vibrant. Now let's talk about the weapons. Each Protector comes equipped with a 6-barrel minigun that uses traditional LEGO studs as ammo. I think these things are great. Kodak blasters and Zamar sphere launchers and all those other things were cool, yeah, but they were always so big and heavy and cumbersome. These are small and light, but provide a good base to pile other elements on, putting a unique spin on each Protector's blaster. They're a lot more modular and LEGO-like than any blasters that we've had in the past. You could do anything with them. The Protector of Stone gets a staff with a blaster mounted on the end. The Protector of Jungle gets a bow. The Protector of Ice is nothing special, but I like how he holds it. The Protector of Water gets... I don't know what this is, but it's neat. The Protector of Fire has a turret mounted on his shoulder, and the Protector of Earth has one right in his chest. That's pretty hardcore. For all the what's-its built around these things, they all work the same way. Just turn a gear behind the barrel, and that's it. On the Protector of Earth, this kinda harkens back to the original toy. Just a little bit. Again, I really appreciate how versatile these blasters are. Most of the added elements may be just for show, but LEGO so easily could have just made them all feel exactly the same. Like, yes, a sphere launcher or a Kodak blaster or any other silly oversized doodad. This is anything but lazy. Some of the Protectors also have secondary weapons, which I feel speak for themselves. The Protector of Earth's Star Drill and the Protector of Ice's Ice Saw work the same way, spinning around when you turn a gear. Come to think of it, there's a huge focus on gear functions this year. As simple as they may be for the Protectors, though, it's nice to see that every single Bionicle set released this wave has you turning something to make something happen, even the smaller ones. The only weapons that really feel odd are the Protector of Fire's thingies. Some say they're swords, some think they're tonfas. I think they're whips. I think he just whirls them around. We'll have to wait and see how he uses them in the cartoon, if he does. While the execution is admittedly awkward, I like the concept and appreciate that they gave him something more appropriately elemental than just a shoulder-mounted cannon. Overall, the weapons are great. They're economical, creative, and just dang cool. On top of that, you get some extra play value when you have a Protector and a respective Toa together. It can give the Toa the Protector's equipment to make them even more powerful. I'll go into these combinations in part 2 or 3, but for now I'll at least show what the Protectors look like without their bells and whistles. And this is one of my favorite things about them. Even without their equipment, they still look good. They still make perfectly respectable Matoran-like beings, if not more so, now that their colors are more focused and traditional because they don't have all that stuff hanging off of them. They still work, mostly. I can't look at the Protector of Jungle without the Banana Boat song coming to mind. Little Banana Man. One of admittedly few new pieces to be released in this line, but a really effective one is this new texture plate. On the Toa, it's used in various other places to add bulk and texture to their large bodies, but on these guys, it's just the right size to make a striking piece of chest armor. I'm certainly not the first to point this out, but it harkens back to the Toa Mata torso nicely, without being so greebly looking that it would clash with the other simpler plates, as well as being less gabby because of them. In fact, while we're on that note, having such a plate underneath works out better than finding some way to make this its own socket shell would've, since the pieces underneath more often than not look like the Protector's flesh, like you can just barely make a peek at what they really are. Most Bionicle characters have traditionally been extreme cyborgs, kinda like Raiden from Metal Gear Solid or General Grievous from Star Wars. Just a few necessary organic bits in an otherwise robotic body, but still enough to call them alive. And whether or not that's what the designers were going for, I think they conveyed it pretty well. Either way, it works out. One thing that bugs me about these guys, and that goes for all of them, is their mask. Yeah, they all wear the same mask. All the residents of Akoto do. How they're able to tell each other apart at all is beyond me. This was a problem I had with the 2.0 line, back when the heroes used dome heads with little bits of equipment that just didn't do enough to differentiate them from me. Jangbricks, formerly known as LEGO Jang, thinks giving a bunch of characters the same helmet or mask is a good move because it makes it easier for kids to make a character whoever they want that character to be. They don't have to be Tahu to wear his mask, that sort of thing. And part of me kinda sees where he's coming from, but my brain just doesn't work that way. I need characters to each have a sort of face I can recognize them by and get attached to, and so do a lot of kids. Facial expressions are so important, if not one of the most important keys to setting characters apart from each other, and when their actual faces are the same, it's nice to have some other way to bring out their personality, something expressive that we can instinctively latch onto as if it were a face, some visual cue that lets you know, this character isn't the same as the other ones. Like, yeah, a mask that doesn't look just like everyone else's mask. Simply put, I fail to see how every character's face being the same is creative. If every Toa wore a How, they wouldn't have nearly as much personality. If they all have the same face, they just blend together, and I kinda stop seeing them as individual characters, especially in the case of something like Hero Factory, where they really are just mass-produced robots that are all essentially copies of each other. Granted, I don't quite get that same sort of bad feeling from the Protectors, at least not as much, given that this mask is much more expressive than the 2.0 dome heads. The dual-injected colors also help give them some individual elemental flair in a way that I can't quite explain. Anyway, I understand that LEGO only has so much money to dump into making new parts, but I hope we won't see this mask reused in future lines. As for the mask itself, it's well designed in some respects and less so in others. The inside shape is different from the smooth outside, creating a crystalline, refracting sort of effect that's really pretty. It's also just a cool windswept look in general, and no matter the color combination, it's always striking. It does bug me a bit that it feels like half a mask with the wearer's bottom jaw left completely exposed, though it does add a bit of posability. Maybe the idea is that this makes them easier for a skull spire to pry off than a Toa's mask, making the Protectors or villagers more vulnerable. It's a nice mask. Not perfect, but nice. Now let's talk about price. $10, eh? Compared to the $8 Hero Factory 2.0 sets, I think it's pretty fair, especially when you consider that at least $1 of that goes towards making a skull spider. Yeah, they're a little on the short side, but they have so much more flair and grit and meat to them. They feel more alive. The weapons are more over the top, and the builds just feel much more complete. Even when not taking inflation into account, they just have more character than most smaller Hero Factory sets, because this isn't Hero Factory, you see. This is Bionicle. And even when comparing these to, say, an Avmatoran or a Gory figure, these are much, much better. G1ers can whine all they want, say garbage like, the new figures are so simple and lazily designed, which clearly isn't true. These little guys have much more complex builds than any of the Matoran of old did, especially in those later years. They have better posability, a strong elemental feel, and just enough texture to feel fitting for any smaller Matoran-like being. They also have a much higher piece count, even though I'm kinda half-touting this since at least a third of those pieces goes towards building the surprisingly complex weapons, and the Skull Spiders, which I'll talk about in depth in part 2 or 3. Even putting that aside though, these are some of the best pint-sized figures we've ever gotten, and they fill the role well. People keep bringing up the feel of Bionicle, what makes it Bionicle, and for me, one of the most important aspects of that, one thing you absolutely cannot leave out, is the people. Not just the Toa and whoever they're fighting that year, but the little guys who make the world feel more populated and real. And I admit, Bionicle's survival would feel kinda half-hard if we didn't get these little reminders of just why the Toa are always fighting anyway. They're that important, and I'd say the Protectors fill that role splendidly. In fact, looking back at all the Matoran that came before in the old days, these are by far the best villager sets we've ever had. Even if you're only really interested in the Toa, I'd recommend getting at least one of these on the side, if only to see how they stand next to their heroes. All of them are great, even the couple that fall kinda short in some aspects, and I'm glad to have every single one. Well, that's all for now. See you guys in part 2 when we cover the Toa.
Blah, 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 blah.